is LBC. From Global, leading Britain's conversation, the Nigel Farage Show.
Mr. Nigel Farage.
Thank you, Donald, and good afternoon, everybody. It's me. Yes, I've nicked an hour from Ian Dale. He's off doing something else this evening. Well, a diplomatic row appears to be breaking out between us and the Americans, and it's all over the two captured Islamic State fighters who were part of the group known as the Beatles. I can't think actually of a more inappropriate name for these four horrendous murderers. Now, as we know, one of them was called Jihadi John, and he, of course, is no longer with us. The same happened to a guy called Ain Davis. But two were captured the other day, Alexander Coty and El Shafi El Sheikh. They were captured and they were part of this group who were responsible for torture and, of course, for beheadings. Frankly, you know, US journalists James Foley, Stephen Sotloff, and there were the British workers, if you remember, Alan Henning and David Haynes. And these guys were part of that. They were involved in all of that. Now, I have been saying for some years now that anybody that goes to fight for Islamic State should have their citizenship stripped from them and should never come back into this country. And people used to bleat on and say, oh, well, you can't do that under international law. But I've always taken the view that they've chosen their state, Islamic State, and we should never have them back in Britain. Well, indeed, unusually, for something I want to happen, it has actually happened because the UK government has stripped them of their citizenship, which means they won't be returning to Britain to face trial. So far, so good, you'd have thought, until Pentagon official Kathy Wheelbarger has said, we are working with the Coalition on Foreign Fighter Detainees and generally expect those detainees to return to their country of origin for disposition. So the Americans are saying, hang on, we don't want this problem. We've got enough problems as it is. You, the Brits, really do need to deal with this. Now, it's quite interesting because Gavin Williamson, the Defence Secretary, when he first took the job, made it clear that people who were actively fighting in the war there were direct targets for us. You know, we'd take them out with drone strikes or whatever it was. And yet we've allowed about 450 of these people back into our country, which shocks me. But here we get tough for the first time and say we don't want them back. And Williamson actually said, and I rather agree with this, he said he thinks that Coty and El Sheikh should never set foot in this country again. And I do agree with that, but it does give us a little bit of a problem. What is going to be the fate of these two? And who knows, there may be others that get captured over the course of the coming weeks. Well, sort of help me through this a little bit and this diplomatic row, and whether this should be something that is dealt with in Syria, or perhaps it should be dealt with by the International Criminal Court at The Hague, or maybe the Americans in the end will take them and put them in Guantanamo Bay. Lots of potential options here. To help me through this is Margaret Gilmore, security and terror expert and former senior research fellow at the Royal United Services Institute. Margaret, good evening.
Good evening, Nigel.
So, as I say, I've been all for stripping them of citizenship, but yes. What happens to them now?
Exactly. No, it was extremely popular, I think, with the public, the idea of withdrawing citizenship in the cases where there was dual nationality. You can't make somebody stateless, but if they have dual nationality, you can take away one of those nationalities. So the UK took away their British nationality, their citizenship. But this hasn't quite worked out, and it seems it hadn't really been thought through. And the problem is that getting rid of their citizenship to stop them coming here, and then now suddenly letting them back in would be a huge embarrassment.
It would, wouldn't it?
It would be an embarrassment, but if they don't and the Americans don't, then the UK and America may not be giving the families of British aid workers and journalists, American aid workers and journalists who were killed out there, the potential for the justice they need and they want and they deserve. So I think it's a very difficult one. I think Guantanamo itself over in the States has definitely been ruled out because it sounds as if there may be enough evidence to at least bring the chance of a conviction, and therefore they would be, if they did go to America, be more likely to actually go through the courts. And I could see that would be quite a popular move over there because there were Americans killed.
Yes.
In my view, that's possibly the most likely scenario. On the other hand, if they were sent back to their countries of origin in Africa, they may face things like the death penalty. Would that, if that came to be and if it was proven, would that martyr them rather than them coming to somewhere like the UK or America and facing the potential for life in jail? So, it's justice thrown up in the air now that this scenario has turned out, where we're not just stopping somebody coming back, but we're stopping people coming back in who some people seriously want brought to justice.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I still, Margaret, take the view I don't want these people back, but I do accept that point of view has caused this little difficulty. Why could they not? Why could they not be tried and dealt with in either Syria or Iraq?
Well, in Syria, there's no recognisable law at the moment, certainly not in the areas that they're being held in, where the Kurds are still fighting on various fronts. They're fighting both pockets of ISIS and they're fighting the Assad regime. And so there are problems with that. And at the moment, the America and the UK don't really seem to be in tune in any way, shape or form with the Assad regime, who are in cahoots with Iran and Syria. So that's difficult. So that's not going to happen. So it is a case of, will the Kurds deliver their own justice in their own kind of way? And what does that mean? Difficult one. Would that be an execution? Would it, if they were found guilty? What the Kurds are saying is we don't really know much about these people, and they've handed them over effectively for interrogation to the Americans. The Americans will have got as much as they can out of them, and they could well have really, really important information. And so, in a way, it seems still to be pushing towards the Americans. But you can see their point of view. They're saying, well, why should we go through this?
Oh, absolutely. Why should we pick up your problem? Let me try one last possible solution, Margaret, to this. What about them being sent to the International Criminal Court at The Hague?
That is a possibility, although I've got a feeling that the America doesn't actually recognise it at the moment. But that certainly could be a possibility. That has been mooted as one way of doing it, and they go through the justice system there. But The Hague tends to deal with things like war crimes. They're not really, doing the whole terrorism thing. So again, that's a difficult one. And the other thing is that, the crimes would be very closely linked to the aid workers and the people they took hostage. And just one more thing, I know that you want to go on, but we mustn't forget the information these people have. There are 22 people still taken hostage, not accounted for, over in Iraq and Syria. And, using them, the America and the UK, I'm sure will be doing this, trying to get information on them at the moment from these people too.
Not an easy problem. Margaret Gilmore, thank you very much indeed for helping us there. Well, Margaret pointing out there is no absolutely perfect solution to this unless the British government was to do a total volte-face and say, we've made a mistake, we're going to reissue British citizenship, bring them back to Britain and try them here. But I have to say, I stick to my point of view that I've had now for some years, that anyone that leaves this country and goes off to fight for ISIS should never set foot back on soil in this country again. That's my view, but tell me what you think. Call me on 0345 6060 973, text to 84850, tweet using the hashtag Farage and LBC at LBC, and of course you can watch us on Facebook and comment there too. John is a new caller. He's calling from Spain. Good evening, John.
Good evening, hi. Just to say, I think that we're quite arrogant to actually expect them to come back for justice in the UK or United States. There've been some murderous acts against our citizens, but the vast amount of murderous acts they've done have been in the Middle East, and the Middle East should have the first choice of where they get tried and duly dispatched. Once we've gotten the information from them, I don't see any reason why they should go to the United States or America. We've had, horrific acts against us, but they've had far more horrific acts against women and other people and other folk in the Middle East. And to me, that's where it should be done. I don't give a damn if there's no real particular government there. They live by the sword, they'll die by the sword.
So, John, would you have no qualms if these two former British citizens were dealt with by a court somewhere in Syria that may not be up to the standards that we would expect, and the death penalty was to be meted out to them, would you have no qualms about that?
No qualms whatsoever, and I'm a humanist, but effectively I wouldn't have any qualms at all about that whatsoever. In fact, they come back to The Hague, where they finish up for 20 years coming out in smart suits and nothing done. It goes against the grain for all those probably thousands of people that have been killed with joy and love to see the killing. They don't deserve a trial by the Western world, as far as I'm concerned. I think most people in the UK and America would expect that.
I think, John, I have to say, I think your view is pretty much the majority view, and I thank you for your call. And actually, Sky have run their own poll. Now, sometimes polls are self-selecting, but, asked, should they be dealt with in Syria and Iraq, 19%. Should they return to Britain to face trial, 5%. Should they be sent to the International Criminal Court, 18%. Should they be sent to Guantanamo Bay, 17%. And unbelievably, should they be killed without trial, even if unlawful, 40%. So of those that responded to the Sky poll, some pretty hard-line responses. And I'm not suggesting that I support that. I don't think summary execution under any circumstances would be right. There must be some form of legal process. But I stick to my point of view. I don't want them back here. You're listening to Nigel Farage on LBC. I'm standing in for Ian Dale. It's now 6:15. What's to be done with these two captured jihadi fighters? They've had their British citizenship stripped from them, and the Americans are saying, whoa, hang on a second, they're not our problem, they're your problem. So where are these men to be tried? Do we want them back in this country and for justice to be seen to be done here? But before I go to that, some breaking news from Germany. The Social Democrats in Germany in turmoil. Arguably, actually, the Christian Democrats under Merkel are in trouble too. But this concerns Martin Schulz. Now, I know Martin Schulz well. I've known him for 20 years. We've done face-to-face heated battle across the European Parliament when he headed the socialist group there. He then, for the last 5 years, was the president of the Parliament, and he and I have a somewhat different world view, to say the very least. Schulz, who said during the election he would not go into a grand coalition with Merkel's Conservatives, then decided he would go into a grand coalition, and that actually he rather liked the idea of him being the foreign minister. His own party have revolted against him. He's had to drop the plan of becoming foreign minister, and today he's announced he's stepping down as leader of the party. And in fact, the turmoil is so great, there is now a poll going on within the Social Democrats amongst their 460,000 members to see whether they approve of going into this coalition or not. I would think, by the looks of it, it's nip and tuck which way this will go. Certainly if the Social Democrats do reject the grand coalition, Merkel's only options then would be to try and form a minority government, or we could be headed for fresh elections. And what's really happened here in Germany is the AfD, the Alternative for Deutschland, the Eurosceptic party with strong views on immigration, they've captured over 90 seats in the parliament, and it's upset the electoral arithmetic. So Martin Schulz's political career is over. But I bet you it's not. I'll have a bet with any of you. If anybody listening to this wants a tenner with me, I will guarantee that Schulz will get a job before too long in Brussels, working for the European Commission, probably as Germany's next commissioner. Perhaps that we can debate another day. But back to these two men, back to Alexander Coty and El Shafi El Sheikh. What should happen to them? I don't want them back in this country, and I've got, texts coming in saying, never allow them back in. They should face justice where they committed the crime. After all, they joined a terrorist group. Removing their UK citizenship was the right thing to do, says Philip in Whiteleaf. Send them to The Hague. The trouble is, if they go to The Hague, it'll take many, many years for this to actually come to trial. And on Twitter, I get, if we must take them back, they must be tried for treason and executed. We don't have the death penalty in this country. We got rid of it back in the 1960s. And for those that are listening that think we should have the death penalty in this country, I don't believe we will ever go back in that direction. And it has been a huge generational change on this, and I do not believe young people in Britain would sanction it. However, these people should face justice for the barbarity that they've committed. The question is where. Gary is a new caller from Wolverhampton. Good evening, Gary.
Hello, Nigel.
So what would you do to him, Gary?
Bring them back to this country and try them underneath our law. as they ought to.
Right, so that would mean the government having to do quite a big volte-face, wouldn't they? They would have to actually say we've made a mistake. They would have to reissue British passports to them, citizenship to them. But you genuinely think the right place to have this trial is here?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, don't mess around. You don't want them going to Guantanamo and just being put there. And while they're there, that's a recruiting tool in itself. That is, because people aspire to go there. Really, to be fair, to Guantanamo, and you don't want them going to The Hague because there's more expense, I believe. Now, listen, I'm ex-squaddy myself. I've got mates who served in the regiments who, when the Balkans was going on, was going around nicking the war criminals that are just coming through and getting justified, getting justice now.
A long time, yeah, very much later.
Expense.
Yeah, I mean, your point, Gary, about expense, I can hear LBC listeners right now saying, hang on, Gary, you talk about expense. What about the expense of the trial in this country? And then if they're given life imprisonment, if they're found guilty, which, one should never prejudge a trial, but it looks quite likely, you've then got the cost of keeping these young men in prison for the rest of their lives.
I don't think they spend... Now, what happens in the future, Nigel, is another thing. I mean, punishment, I mean, that's another debate. That's another debate, what can happen in the future. However, I think, bring them back to this country, and then their fate will be sealed. Get them into the justice system. It seems to me, really, it's a little bit sick, because some people don't really get dealt what they should get dealt, but when you get them into the justice system, they seem to sort of get like they just deserve it, if you know what I'm saying.
All right, Gary, no, you're firmly of the view they should come back here. It will be very embarrassing for the government, but that's what Gary thinks. What does Anne think? A new caller from Brentford.
Right, hello.
Good evening.
Hi, I'm going to simplify my argument and cut out any waffling.
Right.
The caller before this last caller, you had another caller, and I agree with him and with yourself about sending these people back to the country for whom they are fighting, even though they're born over here, because I feel to bring them back here or to send them to Guantanamo Bay is going to exacerbate this situation with terrorism anyway, because it gives them an axe to grind. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. I do.
I'm trying to make things very simple. Life is not simple, but in this situation, they are fighting a cause. They chose to fight it. Nobody pushed them.
No.
Nobody's stopping them. But you can't eat your cake and have it. That's not the way life works. You choose something, there are consequences, and they've got to learn that. And besides, the barbaric way they behave and treat people, we don't have the system. We don't have facility to address these issues the way they treat people, because we operate on a very different system, which they don't. Let them go back to those countries where they will be treated fairly and correctly. They can address those issues in those countries.
Well, I hope that's right, Anne. And I have to say, the other thing that really I must add to this is that I'm still alarmed that there are 450 people, approximately, who have gone to fight for Islamic State, been brutalised, and are now back free, walking the streets of this country. And it just amazes me that when Theresa May was Home Secretary, she talked in a very tough way about what would happen to Islamic fighters, and yet there's 450 of them back here walking the streets. I find that quite extraordinary. Thank you, Anne. On Twitter, I get, so, if a foreigner commits crimes in this country, do you not think they should be deported? Well, in general terms, yes, I do. But I do think, in the case of going off to fight for Islamic State, I think you have forfeited any rights of any kind you have as a British citizen, but I accept that point of view, which has taken a long time to prevail, is now causing a little bit of difficulty. However, I do think they can be dealt with in Syria or Iraq. That is my view. What does Josh from Edgware think? Josh, hello?
Hello. Hi, Nigel. How are you?
You're fine. So what would you do to them, Josh?
So if I'm quite honest, I think I would like to leave them with the Kurds because, one, that's where they pillage, that's where they kill, that's where they rape, and therefore they should be, an eye for an eye, although an eye for an eye makes a world blind. But you have to understand that when they go there, they completely change their mindset. They shouldn't be allowed in this country because they're not in a mindset where they can act civilized or even where they can arguably be rehabilitated. So to be honest with you, I feel like they should be given to the Kurds, and if they consider it necessary, killed. And
again, Josh, that would give you no qualms at all, no?
No. If I'm quite honest, they forfeited any human rights. If I'm quite frank, when they pillaged, raped women, children during the
No, Josh, you made that point of view very, very clear indeed. Peter on Facebook says, let them face justice where they are. We don't want them here. Don't care what happens to them. Sue says, drop them in the middle of the ocean. And I'm getting other messages in much stronger than that, actually. John says, the crimes are in Syria, so Syrian jurisdiction. It's slightly embarrassing that the UK government are trying to palm them off on the US, The Hague, Syria, or wherever else. It's as if they're scared to take any responsibility. Well, I think to whoever sent me that by Twitter, the fact is the British government has been hugely inconsistent on this. You know, we've been saying we'll kill them using drone strikes, but if the next day they come back to the UK, they're free to walk the streets. It's taken us only one person, up until now, over the last 4 years, only one person who we knew had fought for ISIS was denied the right to come back into this country. So we've been highly inconsistent, but I think in this case, we've actually got it right, even though it's led to this debate. Dan is a new caller from Kilburn. Good evening, Dan.
Hi, Nigel. How are you, mate?
I'm fine, Dan. What would you do to him?
Big fan of yours. You're a national hero, mate. Trust me.
Well, thank you, Dan. Some think that, others take a different view. But that aside, what should happen to these guys? These barbarous murderers?
Well, I mean, I went to school with Jaddy John.
Oh, did you?
Right. Yes. Now,
wow.
They do not deserve to be in this country. But also, I feel sorry for America because they want to get rid of them. We don't want them. But then if they do put them in Guantanamo Bay, we start protesting and saying what they're doing is inhumane. So America can't win. Do you know what I mean? They should not be sent back here to be put in prison. I know people in prison that are with a lot of these Islamic ISIS people to be going and play PlayStation and pool and getting fed 3 meals a day.
Well,
halal food.
Well, there's the cost, Dan. There's also the risk, Dan, of course, that in these prisons further radicalisation takes place, and these guys are part of that. Dan, can I ask you?
It's happening.
No, I know it's happening. And it's very worrying. Can I ask you, Dan? So, I mean, how many years did you know Jihadi John for?
Well, all through secondary school, so...
Okay.
For, what's that, 5, 6 years?
And did you get any indications through teenage years that this guy could go on to do these terrible things?
None whatsoever.
None
quiet
whatsoever.
As a mouse.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, and not. I don't mean quiet as in like just a loner. He was all right, just a normal lad in school.
And was he a normal bloke that played football and mixed
normal bloke, played football. Even sometimes at lunchtime, had an odd kind of drink. You know, like bunked off school.
Yeah.
Normal lad stuff, smoking, doing things like listening to music. But as soon as they leave, they go to the mosque down near Edgware Road, Regent's Park, and they get brainwashed.
And that's what happened.
Plenty more. There's plenty more on our streets now.
And Dan, were you
around with us?
when you found out what had happened to him? What was your reaction?
Well, me personally, and my mates that went to that school, we knew it was going to happen anyway. Because after school, we seen them change. As soon as they left school, they all grew their beards very long, started wearing the long dresses, walking around, wouldn't talk to us no more. So them on the streets handing out the leaflets for Sharia. Completely changed. As soon as they hit 16, 17, they changed.
Dan, thank you for that testimony. Amazing to think that these people who've committed acts like Jihadi John did were normal teenagers at one point. That's what Dan says. He was at school with him. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show. I'm standing in for Ian Dale. It's 6:31. Yes, this is Nigel Farage standing in for Ian Dale, and we are talking about Alexander Coty and El Shafi El Sheikh, the two British-born ISIS fighters that have been captured and from whom the British government have removed their UK citizenship. And I'm pleased about that. And I think we should have stripped everybody that went there, including the 450 that are back on our streets. But it does lead to a slight debate as to where they should go next. And the Americans saying, well, kind of, isn't it your problem, really? Why should it be ours? So should they be tried in Syria? Should they come back to this country to face trial? Should they go to the International Criminal Court in The Hague, or should the Americans take them and put them in Guantanamo? And even though I accept there's a debate on this, I have not backed off an inch from saying I do not want them back in this country. I wonder what Didar, a new caller from Wembley Park, thinks. Good evening.
Hi, Nigel. Good evening. So, I have 2 points on this, actually. My first thought would be that I think we need to understand understand that we are a westernized country and we have, our ethical and moral principles. And if we leave them there in Syria, they'll be very likely to get the death sentence, which I think should not happen. So if we will do that, we will abandon our ethics and morals and principles that we have.
Dida, listen.
Yeah?
Can you just speak very clearly and keep still into the mouthpiece? I'm sort of getting good bits of the conversation and not so good bits.
All right. Is it better like this?
It's perfect.
Yeah, perfect. So I was saying, I believe that in this country we have fought for, to have our morals and principles. We have these ethics that we would go against if we would leave the ISIS fighters in Syria. We would leave them there to die because it's very likely they will get the death sentence.
Yep.
And I think by leaving them there, we would go against our own principles. I understand what they did. They're horrific, terrible things. That it's just hard for us to imagine. But at the end of the day, I think we need to keep our principles and our ethics. At the same time, I'm also saying they went back there to die martyrs, and if we actually leave them there, they will die with their dream fulfilled, and they will get what they fought for. So I believe we need to take them back to this country, and this is the real punishment for them, not to die as martyrs in Syria, but actually have.
I understand the point you're making. Making a point about principle. Do you understand why the vast majority of us don't want any of these people ever to set foot back in Britain again?
I completely understand. I think these people do not fit into our society, but that's why we have prisons for. That's why, because there are more of these people in this country, we need to make an example of them to frighten off the other UK citizens that do believe in ISIS and that do plan on going back, or they're involved in these terrorist groups. So it is our duty, because they have grown up here, and we are responsible as a country and as a government to take care of situations like this.
I understand perfectly the logic of what you're saying. However, I think what these people have done is so exceptionally evil that I never want them to set foot back in this country, and I certainly don't want them going into our prisons, being a massive cost to the taxpayer, and perhaps in those prisons radicalising other people. And I may well, Dida, be saying something that doesn't go along with normal British traditions of liberty, but I think these people have broken the rules. Dida, I thank you. It's a passionate case there that we should do the right thing. We should bring them back to this country. I think these people have taken that argument way beyond that. On Twitter, I get the UK is responsible for these characters, and so we are the ones who should prosecute these monsters and hopefully lock them away for good. So strong feelings on both sides of this argument, though I'm minded to say I still think a majority of people don't want them coming back to the UK. Helen is a new caller from St Albans. Good evening, Helen.
Oh, hi, Nigel. I've got a really good idea. It's quite simple. Basically, if they would like to live by Sharia law, fine, let them die by Sharia law. So basically what we can do, this new Crown Prince of Saudi, he's fighting against ISIS at the moment. Well, guess what? They can go there and be beheaded on a Sunday in the square in the afternoon with everyone to watch, and he can even do pay-per-view, because I will pay to watch that.
Come on, Helen, would you really pay to watch that?
Yes, I would. Absolutely, I would, yeah. But why would anyone even consider letting that vermin back in this country? It's ridiculous. And we all know if they come back here, there's a very good chance they'll be found not guilty.
Helen, I don't want them back in this country. I didn't want the other 450. I think Theresa May, as Home Secretary, was hopeless on this, and I don't think anything really has changed until now. And suddenly things have changed. Their citizenship has been revoked, and about time too. So I feel with you on that. But Helen, I wouldn't pay per view to see people being executed. I mean, surely isn't that reducing ourselves? Isn't that, Helen, reducing ourselves to their level a bit?
No, I think it's anger, and I think everyone has really had enough of this now. This country has gone so politically far left in every way. We know damn well if they come back to this country, some of the top barristers in the land will represent them. And guess what? Have we got any witnesses? Have we got any statements? We'll probably walk away, and then we'll feed them. We'll give them.
I think in these cases, Helen, I think they're damned actually by their own social media output. But look, Helen, I want to put this to you one last time. It's people like ISIS that conduct public executions and put this stuff out on the internet. If we were to send them to a place where they were publicly beheaded and that was put on the internet, we have lowered ourselves to their level.
Nick, Nigel, I think everyone is angry. Everyone is enough of the country, and now's the time to actually do something about
All
it.
right. Okay, I'm losing my line. I'm going to have to lose Helen because of that. Well, Helen feels very strongly about that, so strongly she would pay-per-view to see these people executed. Well, it's not my point of view, but I would guess she's probably not on her own in thinking that. Mustafa is a new caller from Wembley. Good evening, Mustafa.
Hi, Nigel.
Good evening. So what should happen?
Well, I just wanted to give a perspective as a Muslim living in London and a British. I think these people, they're really disgusting people. They disgust me, and, they don't represent my religion whatsoever. I think they should be put into prison and left there for good, or sent back to Syria and, they could just,
Well, they're in Syria, Mustafa.
To be honest,
they're in Syria now. The question is,
yes,
should they come back to this country to face justice or not?
Well, I think they should just be left there and die. Be killed by whoever kills them. They should be left there. I just wanted to say also, at the weekend, I witnessed a person, this one of these ISIS supporters. We called on to the police and the authorities, and they arrested him, and I'm happy about that.
Well done.
As much as I can do for my, I'm proud to be British. I'm a Muslim, and I'm proud to say I'm a Muslim. And, I would like to do whatever I can to, get these people out of our country.
Well, that's terrific.
People rid of the whole world.
I'm very, very pleased to hear that, Mustafa. And just tell me, as a Muslim living in London who feels as you do, is the behaviour of people like Alexander Coty and El Shafi El Sheikh, is their behaviour making your life in this country more difficult?
Well, I'm not really, to be honest, I'm happy about my religion. I'm proud to be Muslim.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to mention the previous caller as well, just a gentleman that was speaking to you. He mentioned about, the beard and growing having the phobe and what have you. I'm a person who has a beard, and, I'm proud to have, to be able to practice my religion easily in this country. So, yes.
Okay, well, Mustafa, all I can say is the more people like you there are within the Muslim community shopping these bad guys, the better it's going to be for absolutely all of us. Thank you for that call. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, standing in for Ian Dale. It's now 6:45. Where should these jihadi captured fighters be tried? Should they come back to this country and face justice here? Although the British government has rather taken the view that I've been pushing for years and has stripped them of citizenship. The Americans don't seem to particularly want them. They've got enough to deal with, I guess, themselves. So do they get tried somewhere in Syria? Do they go to the International Criminal Court in The Hague? Or am I just wrong? Am I just simply wrong, folks? Should they keep their British passports and come back here? I'm going to ask Yusuf, a new caller from Harrow, that very question. Good evening.
Good evening. How are you, Nigel?
I'm well. But I normally, Yusuf, and I do believe in British principles of justice. I just feel these people are so appalling. I just never want to see them back in this country.
Of course. I just wanted to test your consistency. So I had the question, if you don't mind. Okay. So would you take the view that people who fight in foreign armies, such as the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, are you of the view that those people are allowed or should be allowed to come back to the UK?
I wasn't aware that Israel was a declared enemy of ours that wanted to destroy our country, ruin our civilization, and that's exactly what ISIS want to do, Yusuf. They are our enemies, and these people have chosen to fight with our enemies.
Okay, but if you're going to uphold international law, then a country taking part in illegal activities, i.e. the occupation of Palestinian territories, which is illegal under international law.
Well, I tell you what, Yusuf, we can discuss Israel another evening, and equally we'll get very strong views on both sides of the argument. But the fact is, there is no comparison between a British citizen joining the Israeli army and a British citizen going to fight for ISIS. In my view, Yusuf, there is no comparison.
Okay, but under British law, fighting under a foreign army is illegal. So I just wanted to know if you stand by what you just said, or if you would...
And also, don't forget, sometimes people have dual citizenship, which, of course, makes that more complicated. And, of course, there are British citizens have been going out to fight against ISIS. Yusuf, do you think these guys should come back to this country and be tried here?
To be honest, I have a mixed opinion. So I think I would side with you in a way and say that people shouldn't really be allowed to come back. But kind of by the same token, they were born here and they have a right. I mean, yes, I'm for the stripping of their citizenship, but because they were born here, maybe this government should give them do them justice and kind of try them and imprison them and take it from there. But
I'll make a prediction that this government, having stripped citizenship, is not, in my opinion, about to reissue it, and I don't think they're coming back here for justice. Yusuf, I thank you for your call. Stuart says to me, they need to stand before the court of the land where they committed the crime. Well, that, of course, would be Syria, would it not? They have killed British, Americans, Syrians, Kurds. Let's all foot the bill to put them on trial. People would lose sleep if they just disappeared, says Darren. Well, yes, Darren, we could bring them back here and foot the bill. I suspect, though, I feel that is a minority view. If we bring them back here, it would cost a fortune. Lawyers who specialise in defending terrorists will make a fortune, and UK justice is far too soft to give them what they deserve. Let their captors deal with them, I get on Twitter. So, we don't deal with our own problems anymore. If a terrorist is born here or has a British passport, it's up to us to deal with it. I can imagine what you'd be saying if we were left to clear up terrorists for other countries. Okay, fine. But I think what these people have done is above and beyond anything we've frankly seen in modern times. I don't want any of them back here, not just these two, but the previous 450 who've been allowed to come back into this country and are out there now walking our streets. I think we've done what we've done here. Frankly, I think it's a little bit too little too late. That's my view. Alan is calling from Aberdeen. Good evening, Alan.
Hiya, Nigel. Your last caller, for starters, is part of the problem.
Okay.
Firstly, I've spoken to ISIS prisoners, and they've all said that Western ISIS, people from here, are more ideologically driven. Mm-hmm. Now, they went across there, they've committed their crimes against humanity across there.
Yep.
They've mass murdered, mass raped, mass whatever. They have to stand trial across there because they committed their crimes across there. But not only that, it also takes away any recruitment and propaganda that they'd use with them being put on trial here or America or whatever, because then they're going to use it as a recruitment tool and say, look, no justice, look at what they're doing. Then they sit prettily, happily in our prisons, recruiting people and seen as heroes by certain parts of, certain people within our own country. So but by them being put on trial, and they'll be hung across there, no doubt about it.
Yeah.
By them being put on trial, it's given the local people, as well as the world, justice, because they will be hung. No two ways about it. But it's important that it's done in their own, but in them countries, because then they can't take it away.
All right, Alan, that's fine. I was fascinated by your first couple of comments, where you said you've spoken to ISIS prisoners. Do I assume from that you work within the prison service?
I was a member of the Peshmerga fighting against ISIS.
Oh, I see. Right. Fine. Okay. And, but some would say that you went off and fought for a foreign power, Alan.
No, I fought alongside the Kurdish Peshmerga against an organisation that we've not seen since the Nazis. Our own government sitting allowing them back into the UK as if ISIS have been away on a package holiday.
Yeah, well, there's 450 of them, Alan. There's 450 of them back on our streets. Do you think, Alan, belatedly, the British government has done the right thing in stripping citizenship from these two?
Yes.
Yep, so do I. Alan, I thank you. I'm going to go to Jay, who's a new caller from Hornchurch in Essex. Good evening, Jay.
Good evening, Nigel.
Hi there. So what should happen?
I believe that I totally agree with the previous caller. I just think that, I was listening to the show and I just felt compelled to call in. A little bit nervous, but...
well, just think of it, Jay. Jay, there's no need to be nervous coming on as a first-time caller. Just imagine we're having a cup of tea and a chat.
Oh, not a problem at all. Well, the thing is,
or even a pint, it's up to you.
Well, I think that's more down your street.
Well, so they say.
But anyway, I totally agree with the previous caller. I think that there's a real problem within the UK at the moment. I feel that the moment that them chaps went over to Syria to fight, they lost all of their British rights, and I totally agree with the decision that's been made, 100%.
Okay. So for once, the government gets it right, Jay. Yeah.
Occasionally, yeah, we do. Sort of prevail once in a blue moon, but I just feel that there's not enough being done. There's some real issues in this country at the moment, and I won't go off topic too much, but I believe that the knife crime epidemic, which you covered on another show, Sadiq Khan, real problems at the moment. So,
certainly the growth of violent crime across the board, Jay. No, absolutely. So we've got enough problems here without these two guys coming back, yeah?
I was impressed with the Muslim caller calling up and reporting the incident that occurred, and he called the police, and that's great. But let's ask ourselves this question: is everybody doing that? I doubt it.
Well, that was why I thought Mustafa was a really exciting call, Jay, and what he said was fascinating, and we need more Mustafas. Jay, first-time caller, hope the experience wasn't too bruising. Thank you for calling in. Mr. Farage, as far as I'm concerned, you lose your rights as a British citizen when you become an enemy of the UK, threaten our way of life, and commit appalling atrocities. So, therefore, they should be stripped of their citizenship and tried in Syria. Well, Stephen, who sent me that on Twitter, that is exactly how I feel about this. Now, moving on, a judge today has told Julian Assange that he should have the courage to face court after losing his latest bid to have his UK arrest warrant dropped. Assange's legal team had claimed it was no longer in the public interest to pursue him for failing to answer bail as he fought extradition to Sweden back in 2012. Should Assange step out of the Ecuadorian embassy to face court without knowing whether there's an extradition warrant on his head? Should he face up to the music? Is it time Assange came out and faced up to the consequences of his actions? Call me on 0345 6060 973 and it all starts next.